Drew, first of all, my friend, what's going on? How are you? Wonderful background choice. Let me just tell you,
Wait a
it's,
sec. Hang on.
it's a
Hang on.
great
Did you
compliment to
did
Craig's.
you have that choice before you saw mine, or was that after you saw mine?
That was 100% a reaction to you putting that one up. I promise
Wait,
you that right now.
come on, Cinderella. I thought that was a perfect choice. It was just before midnight. There was so much hope.
You can't use Cinderella when you're talking about Ohio State or Georgia. Come on now.
Of
Yeah.
course I can.
Yeah,
Welcome, my
I'll
friend.
take
I'm so
that over
happy to
here.
have
Let me
you.
find a Gamecock hat, and y'all can call me Cinderella all you want.
There you go.
Perfect. If the shoe fits.
All right, listen, Drew. We love you, and we want to just chop it up with you, but we really need to get down to brass tacks here because let me just say this to start off with. The SEC is the best conference in the country, and so we're not going to tolerate any slander or anything otherwise when you come on. I'm just kidding. We want to have a healthy discussion here. The thing that I think about with you, because you're covering Ohio State, but also covering the entire conference, and kind of trying to look at it expanded in that way. Ohio State is one of those teams nationally for me that looks like an SEC team, but is not in the SEC and maybe that's just our perspective. I don't know how you feel about that, but there is a short list of teams outside of the SEC that if SEC fans look at them, they go, yeah, they're built like us. And I think you put Ohio State anywhere in the country, and they're going to find success. And I mean any conference in the country, and they're going to find success. So, first of all, let's talk about Tony Petitti. Let's start there. Let's start at the top, and we'll work our way down to some
Is that really the
individual
top?
teams.
Is that the top?
Well, it's supposed to be the top, isn't it, Craig? If the man wears the hat and he has the title and he stands in that gap, isn't he supposed to be at the top?
Sure, if you say so, buddy.
So he has some comments this week. Craig wrote it up for us. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you go check out Craig's article. I think it was titled "Why You Got to Be So Mean" or something to that effect. Do you want to correct me? I see you.
No, it's why you got to be so mean. The Big Ten and the ACC were drinking the haterade this weekend.
All right, so Tony Petitti makes the comments about 6-3 being quote unquote good. What are your thoughts, Drew? Is 6-3 what you need to be successful in the Big Ten?
If 6-3 is your benchmark, especially if you're in the Big Ten or even the SEC, you should probably be aiming a little bit higher. 6-3 is a banner year for like Illinois and a couple of others, but like I don't know. He's trying to position a way to justify that the four auto the auto qualifiers when the college football playoff eventually expands. And I've said that I'm against it, even if it is, benefiting the team that I've grown up rooting for, because, I think the last time Ohio State finished outside of the top four in the Big Ten was 2011. And then the time before that was, I think, 1999. I looked it up back when I wrote about it way back when. Now 6-3 is like it's a good season. It's not like you should hang your hat on it and make your way into the college football playoff. Obviously Ohio State had 2 in conference losses last year with that close one to Oregon, and then the game that still will never not baffle me with Michigan. Yeah, the loss to Michigan, of course. I'll never understand it. I'll never understand it. Yeah, I'll be on my deathbed and I will remember the 2024 matchup, and I'll be like, I don't know what happened on the field, but whatever it did, it worked. And then Ohio State went on the run. But yeah, Tony Petitti, he is doing his job in terms of making sure that the Big Ten tries to throw its weight around, and I still find it to be really weird. I'm like, if you got 3 conference losses, obviously in the Big Ten when they play 9 conference games, it's easier to get those 3 losses than if you play the 8. But yeah, I'm not in on that. If you lose 3 conference games, even if it's back when Indiana was in the division with Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, it's like you're good, but I don't think that you're in the upper echelon and should be able to play in the college football playoff. You're headed for the Outback Bowl.
Right. And I think that's the interesting part, because I heard the slight little dig there, the 9 versus the 8, because that was the other thing that seemed to be a big topic of conversation: 9 conference games versus 8. And the SEC does play 8 conference games, but everyone also does play an additional Power 4 team. The only one this year that doesn't is Ole Miss because Wake Forest kind of ducked on them. I think they were just trying to make it easier on Tony this year. I don't know.
Well, if you want to count Washington State,
I don't.
Where do we put them? Where do we put them?
Not in the Power 4.
They were when it was scheduled.
Not gonna rank. No. It's where you rank. It's where you play them now. So I think that's my biggest question. Is Petitti's job is to triumph and build up the Big Ten. We know the SEC. We know that everyone wants the SEC to go to 9 games. ABC, the Mouse wants to do it. Big Ten wants to do it. Great, that's fine. How does Petitti and Greg Sankey get together and say, okay, let's go to 16. Let's give us more access. Forget your math problem, the 4, 4, 2, 2, 2, 3, 1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 8, 6, 7, 5, 3, 0, 9 model, and just go to the 5+11 model. Do you think there's a road there where we have a 5+11? SEC says, sure, we'll play 9 games. Do you think we have agreement there? And then do you think we're a little more kosher there? Or do you think it's problematic?
I would be surprised if either side blinks in one way or another, whether the Big Ten walking it back to 8 or the SEC jumping to 9, because one, we've got so long of building up all this conflict between the two. It's like you're not gonna take that L.
Right.
The only way that we're gonna do that is if we have complete uniform scheduling around college football, which would end up making it look like an NFL model, kind of like what I suggested before last season, like the promotion relegation, which is obviously pie in the sky. It'll never happen. The only way that we will get anything like that is if the NCAA decides that it has power and tries to figure this sort of thing out. But, the NCAA is just, 4 little letters, and that's about it. The Big Ten and the SEC, they own college football right now. And the only way is if they have some weird backroom, hashing it out kind of thing. I would be incredibly surprised.
What about if they came together like in an alliance? Do you think that would help?
Well, last time the Big Ten tried to go
look
with an
each other in
alliance,
the eyes,
right?
Nice shot, Craig.
Yeah.
So I think that's the interesting part, and I wonder if Petitti is going to be under pressure because obviously you heard it from Greg Sankey, the 5+11, but you also heard your mark being very positive from the Big 12. Jim Phillips had an opinion for once and did come out and I think he's in that 5+11 model. So you're starting to see a little bit of that groundswell kind of seeing out there. And I just wondered, is that enough to put the pressure on Petitti? Does Sankey sort of kind of push that together and kind of move that through?
I think what it'll take is the SEC getting an inordinate amount of teams in. Like obviously last year they got a good handful, but if they can get even more, like if Alabama or South Carolina had gotten in last year, I think it might have made the push a little bit because they have this idea that there's no point in scheduling these big out of conference. So why not try to quote Kurt Signetti, the king poker, adopt an SEC type of schedule and schedule the FCS teams and so on and so forth, which I'm not really for. If Ohio State wants to schedule Youngstown State, I'm fine with it because they're in state. Grambling was a last second addition because that Ohio State and UConn backed out of theirs, but which wasn't exactly a powerful out of conference. But I think the only way for them to actually get moving, the Big Ten get moving on changing anything, is if the SEC has a ridiculous number of teams plus a 4th Big Ten team getting left out. Like if Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon make it and Michigan is just outside, or even Illinois is just outside, and then they have that entire argument. I think the only way is, the Big Ten get screwed, which,
would never happen.
It's funny that Signetti said that too, because I got the stat this week from our owner here at Chief Sports Network, who did the math to see Power 4 games out of conference this year by the conference with 18 teams in the Big Ten, 16 teams in the SEC. It was 19-13 SEC to Big Ten in terms of the game scheduled power 4 opponents out of conference, and that included Washington State in both realms. So if you drop it down, I think the Big Ten plays Washington State and Oregon State, so that would drop you down to 11, drop the SEC down to 18. But regardless, there was more power 4 out of conference. So to me, it's just, you're right, Cignetti is the king poker, but maybe didn't do his homework enough to figure out that there's more out of conference power 4 scheduling happening in the SEC as well. And, maybe he pushes back with, well, you have an extra game to do that with because you're playing 8 conference games, and that's where we go with the conversation.
Right.
But as far as coaches go, in terms of commenting from one conference to the other, I think James Franklin's comments are more of the interesting ones. So I think we have that video, Lucas, if you want to go ahead and throw that up for us really quick.
See, it's a different vibe and it's a different feeling. I think that other conference, when they have their meetings, there's essentially a press conference every single day at the end of the meetings. It keeps people talking about that conference at a time of the year and makes them relevant. We're not doing that. We need to be talking about the Big Ten and our programs and the things that we have done, and making it as accessible to everybody as we possibly can, and connecting with the fans. And don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I think Vegas is a special place, and I think they run events as well as anybody. But it's a different feeling. It's a different feeling. And I've been at those other places where people are putting up babies for you to autograph and stuff. It's different. So I think there's still some things that we got to be strategic and smart about that are going to put our conference and our schools in the best position on a national level, in my opinion.
Coach, what?
All right, Drew. So obviously you have a coach here who's coached in both leagues. He's kind of seen both of the dynamics that you have going on, and is quite honestly not pleased with the presentation at Big Ten Media Days. From your perspective, somebody who's followed the league, followed these teams for a really long time and does a great job of covering it, what's your take on his comments?
I think he's completely correct. The other conference thing is funny coming from James Franklin. I'm like, I get that you coached at Vandy, but I don't think that you're the one that should be making those comments, my friend. But that aside, no, I do think he's correct. A buddy of mine for another show, Saturday Glory, he went over this entire thing as well. It's like he's got a point. When you think of Big Ten, yes, we have the West Coast teams. When you think of Big Ten, you don't think Las Vegas. Indianapolis is that. Indianapolis is right there. Indianapolis or Chicago for that matter, because it's right here in the Midwest. And I think he led up into that, or it was right after that comment itself. He mentioned that a lot of the people on the ground, a lot of the beat writers and so on and so forth that could have attended, couldn't. I am one of them. I could afford to drive 3 hours to Indianapolis from here in, tropical Toledo, Ohio, but
Nice area.
a flight to Las Vegas is not happening from me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to Indianapolis was a self-serving thing for me, but like he's completely correct in the sense that, it's just, it was mind-boggling when they announced that they're going to Vegas, because Vegas does not have a Big Ten footprint. I understand that we have UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington out there. They've had one season in the Big Ten. Yeah, Oregon won. But like, there's no footprint there. There's nothing Big Ten tying them there. Vegas throws a party, but like, there's nothing Big Ten out there. We were really lucky at Last Word on Sports to have both our Washington and Penn State writers make their way out there.
Mm-hmm.
But Indianapolis would have, at the very least, 14 of the teams. Maybe not Rutgers and Maryland, because they're still out there. But like they would have had a much better attendance by like beat writers and fans and so on and so forth. So I completely agree with James Franklin. Chalk that down once.
that and that was a surprise for me because he basically talked about it. He was like, basically they're tucked in the back corner of the hotel. Like it's kind of like an afterthought. There's no St. Elmo's. What was it with the cocktail sauce and the shrimp? What across in Indianapolis there? What is that? It's not St. Elmo's. I don't know. There's a steakhouse in there somewhere fancy. But no, I to me it's Chicago. To me it's Indianapolis. That screams Big Ten. And if you're going to placate to the West Coast, go to Seattle or go to LA. Like, you don't have a team in Las Vegas. Are they going to move the Big Ten championship to Las Vegas? Like, it doesn't make sense. It feels like not to bring up Coldplay again, but it feels like a man in a midlife crisis who can't figure out what they want. So they're going to go out to Vegas for it. And I just don't think that fits, and I don't think that works.
I would understand a little bit more if it was LA because of the Rose Bowl tie.
Yes.
Obviously, it's not as Pac-12 and Big Ten anymore because the Pac-12 is dead and is not going to be a power conference when it, brings in all these other state schools. But like, you at least have that footprint. You saw the Rose Bowl with Ohio State and Oregon, and it was standing room only. And Ohio State, Ohio State travels well, but like, you got LA. You have that. There is a Big Ten footprint if you're going to placate the West Coast. But yeah, no. The Big Ten headquarters are in Chicago. The Big Ten title game is in Indianapolis. It made no sense.
Nope. All right, let me ask one more question before we get you out of here, Drew. Because obviously that's chalk one up in terms of media days for the SEC once again and being the dominant conference and grabbing attention. But let's look at teams that actually play on the field now, okay? So beyond Ohio State and Penn State, who I think everybody has as national contenders coming into 2025, one of the arguments that can be made conference versus conference is going to be depth. And I think that's always the core heartbeat of these debates is which conference has more quality teams. And we've tried to have this discussion in terms of can bowl season help us determine that. And I don't think it's a good indicator because especially at this point, there's so many opt-outs and you don't know who you're going to get and who's going to be there or whatever. Should we have an SEC Big Ten challenge to let them just match up in the middle of the year? Or are we just going to compare numbers back and forth? But ultimately, I think the biggest metric that we look at now is going to be how many teams are going to make it into the college football playoff. And so for you, beyond Ohio State and Penn State, how much drop-off is there behind those two teams? And who else do you tag as somebody who has a chance of making a run at the postseason?
I would say that Ohio State, Penn State, then you've got I think there's a little bit of a drop, and then you hit Oregon. Oregon's going to be replacing a lot, but they recruit as well as anybody. I do respect Dan Lanning, even if he's a bit annoying. They have what it takes, I think, and Decorian Moore is going to be a dog. But you got Oregon. I think Indiana is probably going to be all right because of their weak schedule. Michigan going to be led by the defense again, and then Illinois. I think Illinois will be better than what people think.
Yeah, I mean, no Maple Missile. Craig pointed that out for us in the notes here. I can see it. We'll see what Indiana does. But beyond the top two, we're going to have to wait and see what happens on the field. Again, Drew Crabtree from Last Word on College Football, Last Word on Sports. You can follow along with him to get your coverage of Ohio State, get your Big Ten thoughts, Cincinnati Bengals as well. And make sure that you're following along with Drew so that you can catch up with all of that. If there's somebody that we love that's outside of the SEC, put this guy in the basket, okay? Now, it's time for us to catch a break. Drew, thank you so much for being with us. We'll be back in just